What is up, Armchair Fandom? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a spoiler review of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button that released in 2008. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button is directed by David Fincher. It was written by Eric Roth, and it was based on a short story by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The movie starred Brad Pitt, Cate Blanchett, Taraji P. Henson, Tilda Swinton, Mahershala Ali, among some others. Like I said, this movie was released in 2008, and the first time I saw this movie, it really stuck with me. I ended up seeing it again in theaters another 3 or 4 times, and I've seen it multiple times since it came out on home release. Before we get started on this review, I would like to just remind you to, if you like our videos, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment in the comment section below, and hit the notification bell so that you know when we have new content available. You can also find us on Facebook at the Facebook group Armchair Fandom, and also on Twitter at armchair_fandom. Before we get started, I'd just like to let you know that we're going to have a live stream next Saturday, whatever date that is, not tonight, but next Saturday. And between now and then, we're going to be engaging in our Facebook group, getting some ideas on content moving forward. We're going to start doing some giveaways each Saturday during our live streams. And we'll also be putting out merchandise so that you can help support the channel in that way. Now, before we get started on this review, I would like to tell you a little bit about what the movie's about. Brad Pitt plays a character named Benjamin Button. He's a character that is born in an old man's body, and he's a baby, but he's already aged to the same degree that an elderly person would be, but he begins to age backwards during this movie. And before we get move any further, I would have watched a couple of YouTube reviews on this movie that I consider probably the best 2 reviews I've found. And the 2 reviewers that I watched on these 2 reviews tended to believe that this movie was a take on fate versus coincidence, the debate of whether a person's life is made up by destiny or whether a person's life is just a series of unfortunate or fortunate set of coincidences that play out. And I don't believe that this movie is about that at all. I believe this movie is about death and how each person is on a different road toward the inevitable destination of death. So if you want to look at it as a destiny sort of thing, it probably could be a movie about destiny and the fact that we're all destined to die. But that's what I believe the main thing of the movie is death. Now, whether we have good fate on our way to death or bad fate or whatever the case may be, the movie is a look at death through the eyes of a character who ages backwards. Let's go ahead and get into this. When the movie opens, we're introduced to the character of Daisy, played by Cate Blanchett, as she's laying in a hospital bed on her deathbed. So the first scene in this movie, we're introduced to a character who's on the edge of death. And another reason I believe this movie is about death is because of the line of dialogue that happens between Daisy and her daughter, who is at her side on her deathbed, when her daughter asks her if she's afraid to die, and Daisy responds that she's not afraid, she's just curious of what comes next. And that phrase, along with the title of the movie, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, I believe this is confirmation that this movie's about death, but we're just going to be looking at death through the eyes of someone who experiences it in a completely different manner than the rest of us. While we're in the hospital room, Daisy begins to tell her daughter a story of a man back during World War I who was commissioned by the city of New Orleans to design a clock for their town hall. And he also had a son that had went off to fight in World War I. And while he was engaged in the commission of building this clock for the city, he receives news that his son had died in the war. And because of that, he designs this clock to run backwards. And as he unveils it to the city, he tells the city that he hopes that it would remind the city of the boys that had died in the war, and that it was a hope that one day they could come back and begin and to live, they would raise from the dead and be able to live their lives rather than having their lives robbed of them in the war. And after telling this story to her daughter, Daisy instructs her daughter to go over and retrieve a diary in her belongings from Benjamin, the character of Benjamin Button, played by Brad Pitt. And as Daisy's daughter begins to read this diary, we begin to hear the voice of Brad Pitt narrating the voice of Benjamin. And the diary begins that his name is Benjamin Button, and he was born under unusual circumstances, and that he had been born when the First World War had ended, the same night that the war had ended. And we find out during this line, Brad Pitt reading from this diary, that he was born with this hideous condition. He was born already old in a baby's body. He looked hideous. His mom had died during childbirth. His father had been horrified by the appearance of Benjamin. He snatches Benjamin up out of the cradle and takes off running out of the house with him. He ends up at a river where it's implied that he was thinking about throwing him in the river, but he begins to be chased by police, and he ends up running and dropping Benjamin off on the set of some steps, which coincidentally is the steps that are the steps leading into a elderly home that cares for the elderly, who is run by a character named Queenie, played by Taraji Henson, who does a fantastic job playing this character. The more you watch this movie, the more you'll love the character of Queenie. But Queenie and her husband, Tizzy, discover the baby laying at the bottom of the steps. And when they discover the baby, they're distraught at the appearance of Benjamin at first, and come to find out throughout the course of the movie, Queenie's character is barren. She can't have children, and she's really drawn to Benjamin. She kind of takes on the role of being his mother, and throughout the movie, that's the role that she fulfills in Benjamin's life, is the role of his mother. After this, we see Queenie sneak Benjamin into the room where she stays in this elderly home, and the doctor comes in and examines Benjamin, tells Queenie that he's full of arthritis, his skin has no elasticity, just everything wrong with Benjamin is the things that you would find to be wrong in the elderly. As the movie moves forward, Queenie introduces Benjamin to the other residents in this elderly home, and Benjamin begins to grow, and as he grows, he begins to age backwards, but he just feels like he's right at home in this elderly home. But while he's living in this elderly home, we're introduced to some scenes that makes you realize that even though he looks like an old man, he seems to fit in this environment, that he's actually a child in his mind. We see him learning to read in the scene that we're looking at right now. Mahershala Ali begins to quote a poem, a line from a play, Henry VI, written by Shakespeare, and concerning a character named Mortimer who's on the edge of his own death, which also backs up the point that this movie is about death. But this scene takes place as Benjamin is learning to read. and then we're introduced to Benjamin as he begins to age backwards, and we see him getting bigger, but he's actually getting younger at the same time. Where he meets different people as they come and go in this elderly home. A new person will move in and somebody will pass away, and then another new person will move in and somebody else will pass away. So Benjamin, at a young age, even though he looks old, at a young age, he is introduced to the reality of death very early, living in an elderly home. We're just introduced to all these different characters that are dying off at the same time. There's one line in this movie where Benjamin rolls over and asks Queenie how much time he's got left, because he's under the assumption that he's going to be dying soon, and Queenie tells him that we're all on the same road. Everybody's road is different. He's just on his own road, and that road eventually leading to death. This is another scene where we are made to grasp the idea that though we're looking at a man in an old body, that he's actually young in his mind, as we see him here with a new character to this elderly home coming in through the background. But Benjamin is playing with toy soldiers. He's even making the mannerisms and the sounds with his mouth that a kid would when they're playing with toys or toy soldiers. Here we see another thing that a child would do, but here we see, because his hearing's not good at this phase, he's dropping forks and spoons on the table and hearing the sounds that they make through this hearing aid that he has. And Queenie comes over and tells him to stop. And if you've ever had kids, you know that they will just do some of the most ridiculous things repetitively. And as an adult, as you begin to lose patience with those sorts of things, you'll snap at them and tell them to stop. And that's what Queenie does here. She comes over and tells Benjamin to straighten up and quit acting that way. And we see Benjamin here reading the story of Ivanhoe, just different things that he does early on in the movie that a child would be involved in. Here we see a scene where Queenie takes him to a church service where a faith healer is supposedly healing him, but he's not actually being healed. He's just getting stronger and stronger in his legs as his body is aging backwards. Right here we see another take on that. Though he's looks like he's old, he's getting stronger as the movie progresses. He also is growing younger in his looks. And here we're introduced to the point in the movie where up to this point Benjamin is very curious about things. He even looks down the street in one scene when he's sitting on the porch in his wheelchair. He hears kids playing in the distance, and he looks down the street trying to get an eye on them, and Queenie comes out on the porch and pulls his wheelchair back from the edge. And here he's introduced to this character that takes him out on the town, and in the process of being out on the town, he misses the bus back to his home. And when he finally shows up, Queenie was worried sick about him, didn't know where he'd been, and just shows you the motherly bond that she had formed with Benjamin. And here is the key point in the movie that we're introduced to Benjamin's love interest. You got to remember, Benjamin in his mind is only about 7 or 8 years old, even though he looks like an old man. And it's at this point in the movie that he meets the character of Daisy, who is actually the granddaughter of one of the residents in the elderly home. It's later on after this that Benjamin is getting stronger and stronger, and he decides to take a job with on a tugboat working for Captain Mike. And he goes to sea with Captain Mike. He comes back a few times While he's working with Captain Mike, he even comes back and gets Daisy a few years later as she's grown a little bit older, and takes her out for a ride on the tugboat. And he there's a scene where his father that abandoned him shows back up and takes Benjamin out for a drink. And Benjamin doesn't know that that's his real biological father yet, but we realize at this point in the movie that his biological father is keeping an eye on Benjamin. He knows who Benjamin is. He knows that Benjamin is his son, but he hasn't told Benjamin yet. As Benjamin is working for Captain Mike on the tugboat, he has exploits all over the world. He ends up in Russia, and he ends up meeting the character played by Tilda Swinton, and him and Benjamin's character, the character of Benjamin, and the character played by Tilda Swinton end up having a love affair while Benjamin is in Russia. All this stuff we're learning about as Daisy's daughter reads all this stuff from Benjamin's diary that he kept. Later on in the movie, after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the Chelsea, which is the tugboat owned by Captain Mike that Benjamin works on, is commissioned to go to war, to tow war debris, wounded ships, and things to be repaired. And during this war, World War II, that a U-boat surfaces, a German U-boat, and a lot of the crew of the Chelsea die, including Captain Mike, which leads us to a line in the movie that is repeated only twice, but it shows you that the movie being about death, I believe, how one deals with death is what is the main theme of this movie. As Captain Mike is injured and he's wounded and he's dying, as he dies, he tells Benjamin, "You can be as mad as a mad dog at the way things went. You could swear, curse the fates, but when it comes to the end, you have to let go." And we find out that Captain Mike had an issue in his past with his father, and we'll see Benjamin repeat this line later in the movie when we get to that point. But after Captain Mike dies, and they end up coming out of this run-in with this submarine, and everybody except 2 members of the crew dies, Benjamin comes back home and meets Queenie, and as you can see from this clip, he's already grown to what would be considered now a middle-aged man. He's no longer in an old man's body, but he's middle-aged, so his mind at this point in the movie is beginning to catch up with the appearance of his body. This is the first time after he comes back home from the war that he sees Daisy again, but Daisy comes up to the house, and as she's come up to the house, he walks out on the porch. She takes her a few minutes to notice him, to recognize who he is, but she finally realizes that it's Benjamin. The last time she had seen him, he was an old man. Now he's more in a middle-aged man's body, but they go out for dinner that night, and come to find out she's been dancing as a ballerina. She's been working for a dance company on stage, and him and her have a date, so to speak, and she's very flirtatious with him, but he's very hesitant on having any kind of relationship with her at this point in the movie, even though he has feelings for her. The movie progresses, and later on, back to the line spoken by Captain Mike about being mad as a mad dog, cursing the fates, all that stuff. When it comes down to the end of your life, you have to let go, and at this point in the movie, Benjamin is notified by his biological father that he's sick and he's dying. He's told by his biological father that he is his father, that Benjamin is his son, and that he's dying. He's going to leave Benjamin all of his belongings, which he's actually a very wealthy man. Uh, and he's getting ready to leave Benjamin all of his inheritance. And later on, Benjamin's laying in the bed thinking about it, and he decides to go get his dad and take him out to the end of this field, which I believe is the most beautiful scene in the movie, when he carries his biological dad out and puts him in a chair to watch the sunrise. And as his biological father, who is dying himself, is watching the sunrise, Benjamin utters the phrase again, "You can be as mad as a mad dog at the way things went. You can curse the fates, all this stuff, but when it comes to the end, you have to just let go." And this is not actually him dying, but his father dying. So we also see that death is inevitable for everyone around us, not just ourselves. So how are we going to deal with the death of others? Are we going to hold grudges, or are we just going to let things go? And Benjamin had decided to let things go, as evidenced by him going and getting his sick, infirmed father to enjoy the sunrise one last time. Now we see Benjamin, him and Daisy have kind of met in the middle at this point in the movie. There's some more events that take place during this movie, but Benjamin and Daisy finally get together as love interest. They're about the same age now in their minds and in their bodies, and they begin to have a romantic relationship and start being involved with each other. Here we see a line spoken by Daisy. We hear a line spoken by Daisy as she is leading a dance school. She teaches other girls how to dance, and she tells Benjamin that they've kind of met in the middle in their life. They look the same age. Their minds have experienced pretty much the same things that develop a person's outlook. And that's where we're at this point, is their relationship. And come to find out that Daisy ends up getting pregnant. Benjamin becomes a father, which his condition now that he's a father begins to weigh heavily on his mind. And instead of learning the lesson, which is one tragedy of this movie, instead of learning the lesson from his own father that abandoned him, and the father of Captain Mike earlier in the movie, Benjamin decides that because he's growing younger as time goes on, that him and the baby would be too much of a burden on Daisy, and he ends up leaving them. He sells everything that he has, gives them the money, and ends up leaving them. And we see later in the movie, it shows us some of the things that he did while he was away. And as she's reading the diary, Daisy's daughter, Benjamin's daughter, is finding out that Benjamin is her father, that she's been reading about her father the whole time. And later on, we see this scene take place where Benjamin does come back one last time. We see that he actually looks like a teenager. Daisy's daughter, their daughter, doesn't know who he is, but Daisy knows who he is. They end up having a one-night stand together one last time. Daisy's kind of upset with him that he came back at all, but that she knows that he was right, that she couldn't be raising him and the daughter at the same time. And then later in the movie, we find out Benjamin begins to grow into a child, and as just any other elderly person would, as a child, his mind is actually growing older as his body grows younger, and he's actually experiencing the symptoms of dementia and Alzheimer's. So they call from the elderly home. He ends up back at the same elderly home that he was dropped off at as a baby, and Daisy is contacted, and she comes to try to help with the situation. but he's suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's. It's a little boy. In a little boy's body, he's suffering the effects of an old mind. Here, he's even younger, and he even tells Daisy at some point, this is a scene where Daisy's actually moving into the elderly home herself, and so him and her are going to be cohabitating in this elderly home, her as an elderly woman, him as an elderly man in a young little boy's body. And there's one scene in this movie where he actually tells her it feels like he had this whole life before, but that he just can't remember what it was. And he tells her this as what appears to be a little boy. Here we see Daisy as Benjamin is losing his ability to walk. This is a take on even when people grow older, in the normal sense, they end up reverting right back to a child. They lose their ability to walk. They lose their ability to remember. Their mind becomes like a child, which affects the physical body. But here we're seeing it in a character that ages backwards. So his mind is causing him to lose the ability to do these things, but we're seeing it in the form of a child, and here it's actually in the form of a toddler. And we see Daisy leading him along, and here we see Daisy holding him as an infant, as I guess a little bit older than an infant. She's sleeping, he's asleep, and then we're brought to the final scene in Benjamin's life, where Daisy is reciting to her daughter in the hospital room that for a moment, when Benjamin, as a baby, looked up at her, that she knew that he knew who she was. And then Benjamin just goes to sleep and passes away. With all of that said, that's it for this review. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I ramble a lot, but I don't review movies unless it's a movie that I really, really like. I would suggest anybody to watch this movie. It's rated about a 7.8 on Rotten Tomatoes, I believe. I would really give this movie, I know most of the scores I give on this channel are high, but that's just because I'm not going to take the time to review a movie unless it's something that I really, really love. This movie is one of those movies that I could watch over and over and over. I love The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. There's so many things that it speaks to that if you watch it over and over, you pick up on. This is just a very beautiful take on how a person ages. It's a beautiful take on falling in love with somebody and them being by your side until you die. And I would suggest this movie to anybody. I would give this movie about an 8 out of 10. Possibly as high as an 8.5 out of 10. And with all that said, if you like this review, if you like our other videos, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, leave a comment in the comment section below. And with all that said, I hope you enjoy this Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and go find it somewhere and watch it. You can watch it on YouTube for free right now with ads, but check out The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and have a good weekend.